Today, I want to talk about corruption and the damages it can do to the economy and the stock market. Corruption always involves small groups of special interest. We call them special interest groups. These people, small groups of people, only pursue their own interests for their own benefit rather than the national interest of the country. Corruption appears everywhere around the world. We can see them. The question is not whether corruption exists, but how much and to what extent. The damage of corruption may be small if there's no mass dislocation of resources. Otherwise, it can be really bad. And corruption is also a vicious circle. It's very hard to get out of it. And it will bring the country to ruins. Have you ever wondered how come in the world there are so many countries remain so poor for so long? Why? Well, one of the reasons must be corruption. There are two big vicious circles for poor countries. One of them is poverty, the other is corruption. Poverty is very hard to get out of. As you can see, when you're poor, you tend to become poorer, and your kids and grandkids tend to become poorer. It's very hard to get out of it. Corruption is the same way. One good example is Pakistan. We can see there are three major interest groups there. One of them is the army, or maybe the generals, the government, the top officials, and the warlords near the border regions. The army takes over the government anytime they want. We have seen them doing this several times. So Pakistan is known as a country without an army. The top officials in the government routinely pilfer their national treasury. And with the money they steal, they deposit in London. You will find a lot of wealthy Pakistani officials living in London. The other example is former South Vietnam. Remember, in the 70s, it collapsed around 1975. Even after 10 years of massive American aid. And a few days prior to the collapse, the president of South Vietnam chartered a commercial liner to fly his gold holdings to Switzerland. But the pilot refused to do it. So this news became public, and people wondered, where did all those gold come from? Well, you can probably guess. South Vietnam is also well known for its competitive corruption. What do we mean by that? It means that the officials of the government compete among themselves to issue licenses for everything, including commercial projects, passports, even exit visas. Another example I want to mention is Russia. Remember, the Soviet Union imploded around 1989. After the collapse of the communist regime, the Russian government started to privatize all the things owned by the government. Some wealthy businessmen, together with the mafia, wind up getting most of the pie because they have the money to buy the business from the government at very low prices. Also, they find that the government is very willing to partner with them. In this case, Russia has become an oligarchy. Oligarchy means a small, powerful group of people or businessmen controlling most of the business. The damages cannot be seen that easily. On the surface, because of high oil and gas prices, the Russian economy is floating all right. However, if you compare the performance of the Russian economy with the economies of other countries like Poland or Hungary, who were also liberated from communism about the same time, these East European countries are performing much better than the Russian economy. Now we come to China, which is a big contrast compared with Russia. There's a big change in China starting late 1970s, because when Deng Xiaoping took over, he reoriented the economy from communism to capitalism. So most of the business are built by the Chinese people, not by privatization of government holdings. And this has been going on for the last 20 years. The party still runs the government and also owns and runs most of the big businesses. How big is the Communist Party? About 60 million members. And we have a big group of people controlling the economy. If you're doing big business in China, you better know somebody in the Communist Party. Otherwise, when you want to get a special license, it's very tough. And we can say that rapid growth still exists in China in spite of rampant corruption. Now we come to the USA. For the last few years, we have seen massive dislocation of resources in this country because of the influence of the special interest groups. And this gets worse because the Republican Party is a willing ally with the special interest group. Around the year 2000, the US federal government has a $500 billion surplus accumulated during the 90s. However, after about 8 years, in 2008, the $500 billion surplus has been turned into a $1,000 billion deficit. How come? Well, basically because of two things. One of them is the big tax cut for the rich, which comprise only about 5% of the population. The other big spending is the war in Iraq, which is ill-conceived and mismanaged. Second example, healthcare reform. They are supposed to do, but it's been hijacked by those special interest groups. Who are they? Drug companies, insurance companies, and private hospitals. And what are the results? Runaway healthcare costs, runaway prices, low quality care, and 48 million people uninsured. A third example is energy policy. There is no energy policy in the United States because the policy has been hijacked by special interest groups. Who are they? Oil companies, coal companies, rich farmers, auto industry, and its labor unions. Results: very little investment for alternative energy. The legislators, congressmen and senators, want to please the special interest groups to get re-elected. So they add billions of spending to the federal budget. And we call those things earmarks. One of the infamous earmarks is the bridge to nowhere. An example that everybody can understand. The government is a willing partner with the banks and Wall Street for the last few years in pursuing deregulation of the financial industry. That means the government doesn't want to supervise the banks and let them do whatever they want. So the banks go wild. The result, everybody sees, they have created a big housing bubble, and that bubble eventually burst in late 2008. What happened then? As you can see, we had a financial tsunami, followed by a worldwide recession